It wasn't like I woke up one day and decided to be the family's go-to person. It just sort of happened. I'm 34, living in Denver, working in marketing. My job's decent, my apartment's cozy, and I've got enough money saved up that I don't stress over bills. Nothing flashy, but I'm comfortable. And somehow, being comfortable turned me into the problem solver for everyone else's mess. It started small. Mom would call about the furnace breaking down, or Dad would need a little help covering an unexpected car repair. I'd pitch in without hesitation because that's what families do, right? But over time, it became more than the occasional favor. My younger sister, Melanie, made sure of that. Melanie's 28 now and married to a guy named Kyle. They met in college, and he's fine, I guess. A little quiet, a little awkward, but nice enough. Melanie, though, she's the star of the show. Always has been. She's the kind of person who walks into a room and everyone turns to her, smiling before she even says a word. Charming, funny, and just manipulative enough to get what she wants without anyone noticing. Growing up, it was obvious who the favorite was. Melanie got the best clothes, the biggest birthday parties, and all the attention. I wasn't jealous, not really. I just learned to keep my head down and not ask for much. If I wanted something, I saved up for it myself. By the time I was 16, I was already working part-time at a coffee shop, putting money aside for college. Melanie, on the other hand, was always getting handouts. When she turned 16, she decided she needed a car. Not wanted, needed. Mom and Dad couldn't afford one, but instead of telling her no, they came to me. I was working weekends, saving every dollar I could, but they hit me with the classic, family helps family line. I gave in because, honestly, what choice did I have? Saying no just wasn't an option in our house. Melanie got her car, a beat-up little sedan that she loved, and life moved on. But the pattern was set. Every time Melanie wanted something that Mom and Dad couldn't afford, they turned to me. College tuition? Just a little help so she doesn't have to take out loans. Her dream wedding? It's just for the flowers. You don't want her to be disappointed, do you? I don't know why I kept agreeing. Maybe it was guilt, or maybe I just wanted to avoid the drama that always followed if I pushed back. Either way, I always ended up footing the bill. And Melanie? She never even pretended to be grateful. If anything, she acted like it was my duty to make her life easier. The worst part wasn't even Melanie's entitlement, it was how my parents encouraged it. No matter what I did, it was never enough. I could have the best job, the nicest apartment, zero debt, and they'd still find a way to criticize me. You're doing so well, Ethan, Mom would say, but we're still hoping you'll settle down and give us some grandkids someday. Meanwhile, Melanie could stumble through life with no plan, and they'd praise her for trying her best. It was exhausting. I started to feel like I didn't exist to them as a person, just as a solution to their problems. The more I helped, the more they expected. And if I hesitated for even a second, the guilt trips would start. Don't you care about your family? You're in such a good place, Ethan. Why can't you just help out a little? I told myself it was fine. I had a good job. I wasn't struggling. Helping them didn't hurt me financially, so why not keep the peace? But the truth was, it did hurt. Not my wallet, but something deeper. No matter how much I did, it was like I'd never be good enough for them. Not in the way Melanie was. I don't know why it took me so long to see what was happening. Maybe I didn't want to believe it. Maybe I thought things would change if I just kept going along with it. But Melanie pushed things too far this time, and once she did, there was no going back. A few weeks before Christmas, Mom called me. At first, I thought it was the usual holiday talk. Plans for dinner, who was bringing what, the kind of conversations we had every year. But something about her tone was off. She sounded overly sweet, like she was working up the courage to drop a bomb on me. "Hi, honey," she started. "How's everything going?" "Fine," I said. "Busy with work, but good. What's up?" "Oh, nothing much," she said lightly, dragging the words out in a way that immediately made me suspicious. "I just wanted to talk about Christmas plans." "Okay," I said, waiting. "Well," she said, and then there was this long pause, the kind that makes your stomach drop before you even know why. "We've been talking, and we think it might be better if you sit this one out this year." I froze. "What?" "It's not personal," she added quickly. as if that would make it better. It's just, Melanie mentioned some things, and we don't want any tension during the holidays. What things? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Well, she said you've been making some comments about not liking our Christmas traditions, that you think it's all about her, and you'd rather not spend money on gifts for the family. It's just, we don't want anyone feeling uncomfortable. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was such a blatant lie, and the fact that Melanie had fed it to them, and that they believed her without question, hit harder than I expected. That's not true, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. I never said anything like that. Where is this even coming from? Mom sighed, and I could tell she was already tired of the conversation. Melanie seemed really upset, Ethan, and you have been a little distant lately. Distant because I've been busy with work, I said, my frustration building. Not because I hate Christmas or whatever Melanie's trying to spin here. Well, Mom said, her tone soft but firm, we think it's just better this way. It's nothing personal, honey. We just want to keep the holidays peaceful. There was no point in arguing. I could tell from her voice that she'd already made up her mind. Fine, I said, keeping my tone flat. If that's what you want. She seemed surprised that I wasn't pushing back. It's not what we want, Ethan. It's just for the best. Sure, I said, unable to hide the sarcasm. Merry Christmas, Mom. I hung up before she could respond. For a while, I just sat there, staring at my phone. I wasn't angry, at least, not in the way I expected to be. I was tired. Tired of being the villain in Melanie's stories. Tired of being the one who always had to explain myself, defend myself, while she got to play the victim. The next day, Melanie called. I debated whether to answer but eventually gave in, more out of curiosity than anything else. Hey, Ethan, she chirped, her tone so cheerful you'd think nothing had happened. What do you want, Melanie? I asked, skipping the pleasantries. She didn't even acknowledge my tone. So, listen, I need a favor. My tuition's due soon, and Mom and Dad can't really help right now. I was hoping you could cover it. I let out a laugh, sharp, humorless, almost a bark. You're kidding, right? You just got me uninvited to Christmas, and now you're asking me for money? She paused, like she hadn't expected me to bring that up. Oh, come on, Ethan, she said, her voice light, dismissive. That's not what this is about. Christmas is one thing, but this is important. It's my education. Do you even hear yourself? I said, forcing myself to stay calm. You lied about me to Mom and Dad, got me kicked out of Christmas, and now you're calling like nothing happened, asking for thousands of dollars? Don't be so dramatic, she said, sighing like I was the one being unreasonable. Mom and Dad just wanted a peaceful holiday. It's not my fault they made that decision. Besides, this is about family helping family. You've always been there for me. There it was. The guilt trip. She was so good at it, sliding it into conversations like it was harmless. For years, it worked. But this time, I wasn't biting. I'll think about it, I said curtly, cutting her off before she could keep going. Great. Thanks, Ethan, she said brightly, as if the conversation had gone perfectly. I knew I could count on you. When she hung up, I sat there for a while, the audacity of it all sinking in. Melanie had spent her entire life spinning stories, twisting the narrative to suit her needs. And my parents? They ate it up every time. For years, I told myself it was fine because I could handle it. But this wasn't fine. This wasn't okay. And for the first time, I realized it was never going to stop, not unless I made it stop. The next day, I called Mom. I didn't want to, but I knew if I let this sit, it would only fester. I told her we needed to have a family meeting, not just her and me, but everyone. Ethan, do we really need to make this a big deal? She asked, her voice hesitant. It already is a big deal, I said firmly. You uninvited me to Christmas because of something Melanie said that wasn't even true. We're going to talk about it, all of us, or I'm done. She sighed, the way she always did when she thought I was being difficult, but finally relented. Fine, tomorrow evening. But please, Ethan, don't come in looking for a fight. I didn't answer that. Instead, I hung up and tried to prepare myself for what was bound to be a disaster. The next evening, I pulled up to my parents' house, The same house I'd grown up in, but it felt more like enemy territory now. I sat in my car for a minute, staring at the windows glowing with Christmas lights, before finally forcing myself out and heading to the door. When I walked in, Melanie and Kyle were already there. Kyle gave me a half-hearted nod before turning his attention back to his phone, clearly not wanting to be involved. Melanie sat on the couch, scrolling through Instagram like she didn't have a care in the world. Mom came out of the kitchen with a tray of coffee and cookies, smiling like this was some festive family gathering instead of the confrontation it was about to become. "Hi, honey," she said, forcing cheerfulness. "We were just getting settled." "Great," I said flatly, taking a seat across from Melanie. Dad was in his recliner, arms crossed, his expression already tired like he couldn't believe we were doing this. "So," Mom began after an awkward silence, "Ethan, what did you want to talk about?" I didn't waste time. "This is about Christmas and the fact that I was uninvited because of something Melanie said that isn't true." Melanie finally looked up, her face a perfect mix of annoyance and fake innocence. "Oh my God, Ethan, are you still on this?" I didn't lie. "Really?" I said, pulling out my phone. "Because I have the texts to prove otherwise." She blinked, clearly caught off guard. "Texts?" "Yeah," I said, scrolling through the messages. "Remember when I asked you what I should get Mom and Dad for Christmas? This was 2 weeks ago." I opened the conversation and handed my phone to Mom. "Here's me asking Melanie for gift ideas," I said. "I even said, I don't care about the cost. I just want to get them something meaningful." Mom's face softened as she read the message, but before she could say anything, I pointed to the next part. "And here's Melanie's response. Why waste money on gifts? They don't even appreciate it half the time." I let the words hang in the air. Mom looked up at Melanie, her expression confused. Dad shifted uncomfortably in his seat, and for once, Melanie didn't have a quick comeback. "Oh, come on," she said finally, crossing her arms. "You're making this a bigger deal than it needs to be." "I didn't mean it like that." "Then what did you mean?" I asked. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you lied to Mom and Dad about me to get me kicked out of Christmas." Her face flushed red, but she kept her composure. "It's not a lie. Maybe I misunderstood what you meant, but—" "There's nothing to misunderstand," I said, cutting her off. "You twisted my words, like you always do, and they believed you without even asking me about it." "Ethan, that's enough," Mom said sharply, her voice full of tension. "We're not here to point fingers. We just want to move past this and enjoy the holidays." "Move past it?" I repeated, incredulous. "You mean sweep it under the rug, like everything else?" "That's not happening this time, Mom. Why are you making this such a big deal?" Melanie snapped, her voice rising. "I'm sorry if I misunderstood, okay? But you don't have to turn it into some huge thing. We're family." "Exactly," I said. "We're family. Which is why it's so messed up that you lie about me and think it's no big deal. And it's even more messed up that Mom and Dad didn't even bother to ask for my side of the story." Dad finally spoke up, his voice low and gruff. "Ethan, we don't need to rehash this. Melanie said she's sorry. Can't we just leave it at that?" "She hasn't actually apologized," I pointed out, glaring at Melanie. "I'm sorry, okay?" she said, rolling her eyes. "Happy now?" I shook my head. "No, I'm not. Because this isn't about just this one time. This has been going on for years. You lie, you manipulate, and Mom and Dad always take your side. I'm done playing along." "Ethan, don't do this," Mom said, her voice almost pleading. "We don't want to lose you." "Then maybe you should think about how you've been treating me," I said, standing up. "Because I'm not going to sit here and keep pretending everything's fine when it's not." I grabbed my coat and headed for the door. Mom called after me, but I didn't turn around. For once, I wasn't going to let them guilt me into staying. As I stepped outside into the cold night air, I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, anger, and a deep sadness I couldn't quite shake. I knew I'd done the right thing, but it still hurt. No matter how much I tried to fix things, it seemed like I'd always be the bad guy in their story. And for the first time, I realized I didn't care anymore. The next day, I woke up feeling strange. Part of me was relieved. I'd finally said the things I'd been bottling up for years. But another part of me felt hollow, like I'd just taken a sledgehammer to something I'd spent my whole life trying to hold together. I wasn't sure if it was guilt, sadness, or just exhaustion. By mid-morning, my phone started buzzing. At first, I thought it might be Mom or Dad trying to patch things up, but it was Melanie. I let it ring. A minute later, she called again. I rolled my eyes and picked up, bracing myself. "What now, Melanie?" I asked, skipping the pleasantries. "I just want to talk," she said, her tone calmer than I expected. "Can we meet somewhere? In person?" I almost laughed. "Why? So you can try to spin this into my fault again?" "No," she said, surprising me. "I'm serious, Ethan. I just want to talk. No drama, I promise." Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a cafe halfway between our places, a spot I picked because it was public and neutral. If things went south, at least I wouldn't be trapped. When I walked in, Melanie was already at a corner table, fidgeting with her coffee cup. She looked nervous, which was unusual for her. Normally, she walked into any situation like she owned it. "Hey," she said as I sat down. "Hey," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then she took a deep breath and blurted out, "I'm sorry." I blinked, caught off guard. "For what?" "For everything," she said, looking down at her coffee. "For lying about you to Mom and Dad. For taking advantage of you. For, I don't know, just being a crappy sister." I leaned back in my chair, trying to read her. "Why now?" She shrugged, her fingers tracing patterns on the cup. "Because you were right. About all of it. I've always counted on you to bail me out, and I've never really thought about how unfair that was to you. I didn't want to admit it before." I didn't say anything. I wasn't sure if I believed her. "I talked to Kyle about everything after you left last night," she continued. "He told me I needed to stop blaming everyone else for my problems and start taking responsibility. He said he doesn't want to keep living like this either." That surprised me. Kyle rarely spoke up about anything, especially when it came to Melanie. "I know I've been selfish," she admitted. "And I know it's not enough to just say sorry, but I really am. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I want to try to make things right." I studied her for a moment, trying to gauge her sincerity. She looked different, less smug, more vulnerable. It wasn't a side of her I'd seen before. "Making things right means more than an apology," I said finally. "It means actually changing. It means not calling me every time you're in a bind and expecting me to fix it. It means owning your mistakes instead of blaming everyone else. Can you do that?" She nodded. "I'm going to try. I mean it, Ethan. I don't want things to stay like this between us." I wanted to believe her. Part of me even did. But another part of me knew it wouldn't be that easy. Change doesn't happen overnight, especially not for someone like Melanie. "I appreciate you saying that," I said carefully, "but I'm going to need time. You can't undo years of this with one conversation." "I know," she said quietly. I hope we can get back to being okay someday." "That's up to you," I said. "You're the one who needs to change, Melanie, not me." We finished our coffee without much more to say. When we left, she hugged me, a little too tightly, like she was afraid I'd disappear if she let go. I patted her back awkwardly, not quite ready to reciprocate. On the drive home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. For the first time, Melanie had actually owned up to what she'd done. It didn't erase everything, but it felt like a small step forward. That evening, Mom called. I debated whether to answer, but eventually picked up. "Hi, honey," she said, her voice cautious. "How are you?" "I'm fine," I replied flatly. "What's up?" "I talked to Melanie earlier," she said. "She told me about your conversation." "Okay," I said, waiting for her to get to the point. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry too," she said, her voice soft. "For not listening to you. For taking her side without even asking what really happened. It wasn't fair, and I see that now." I didn't know how to respond. Hearing Mom admit she was wrong was rare, to say the least. "I hope you know we never meant to make you feel unimportant," she continued. "We just got so used to relying on you because you've always been the strong one. But that doesn't mean it was right." Thanks, Mom, I said finally. But like I told Melanie, words aren't enough. If you really mean it, things need to change. They will, she promised. I can't speak for your sister, but I'll try to do better. I just hope you'll give us another chance. I'll think about it, I said. She seemed relieved, even though it wasn't much of a commitment. We love you, Ethan, she said softly. I know, I replied, though I wasn't sure I believed it. Good night, Mom. After I hung up, I sat there in the quiet, trying to sort through everything. The apologies felt real, but I couldn't shake the fear that they were temporary, just a reaction to the blow-up. It was too soon to tell if anything would actually change. Still, it was a start. And for now, that was enough. For the next few weeks, things were quiet. Too quiet, honestly. Melanie didn't call or text, and Mom stuck to the occasional polite check-in. At first, I thought they were giving me space, but deep down, I knew they were probably waiting for me to break the silence. That's how it always worked. They let things simmer, hoping I'd come around and smooth everything over like I usually did. This time, though, I didn't reach out. Instead, I started focusing on myself in a way I hadn't in years. I picked up running again, something I dropped ages ago because I was always too tired from juggling everyone else's problems. I even signed up for a weekend photography class, something I'd been meaning to do forever but kept putting off. It felt good to prioritize myself for once, like I was reclaiming little pieces of my life that I'd handed over without realizing it. But the quiet didn't last. One evening, just as I was settling in to watch a movie, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Melanie. Hey, can we talk? It's not about money, I promise. I stared at the message, debating whether to respond. On one hand, I didn't want to get sucked back into the same old dynamic. On the other hand, if she was making an effort, maybe it was worth hearing her out. After a few minutes, I replied, What's up? A minute later, my phone rang. Melanie didn't even wait for me to answer before launching into it. Okay, so, first of all, I'm not asking for anything, she said quickly. I wanted to let you know I got a part-time job. I raised an eyebrow, even though she couldn't see me. Really? Yeah, she said, and I could hear the hesitation in her voice. It's at this little cafe near campus. Nothing fancy, but it's something. I didn't say anything right away, partly because I was genuinely surprised. Melanie working? Voluntarily? That was new. That's good, I said finally. I'm glad you're doing something for yourself. She let out a nervous laugh. Yeah, well, it's harder than I thought it'd be. Turns out, working and studying at the same time isn't as easy as I made it seem when I said you should have been able to do it. There was a self-deprecating edge to her tone that caught me off guard. Was this actual self-awareness? Yeah, it's not easy, I said, my tone softer than I intended. But it's worth it. You'll feel better knowing you're handling your own stuff. I already do, she admitted. I mean, it's a small thing, but it feels good. Like, I'm finally doing something instead of just expecting everyone else to fix things for me. I didn't know what to say to that. For the first time, Melanie wasn't spinning a sob story or looking for a way out. She was owning up to her actions. I just wanted you to know, she continued. I know I have a long way to go, but I'm trying. I really am. I can see that, I said, and I appreciate you telling me. Just don't stop. It's easy to start something when you're motivated, but sticking with it? That's where the work is. I know, she said, and I will. I promise. We ended the call on a surprisingly positive note, and for the first time in years, I felt like maybe there was hope for her. Not because she'd suddenly become a different person, but because she seemed to actually want to change. A few days later, Mom called. She sounded more relaxed than she had in weeks, and I could tell she was testing the waters, trying to feel out where I stood. Have you talked to Melanie? She asked casually. Yeah, I said. She told me about the job. Mom let out a small sigh of relief. I'm so glad to hear that. I know things haven't been easy between you two, but it seems like she's really trying. She is, I agreed. But it's going to take more than just one good step. We'll see if she sticks with it. I think she will, Mom said, her voice hopeful. She's been talking about how much she wants to prove herself to you. I frowned. It's not about proving herself to me. She needs to do this for herself, not because she thinks it'll fix things between us. I know, Mom said quickly, but it's a start, isn't it? Yeah, I admitted. It's a start. Over the next few weeks, things started to shift. Melanie kept the job and even sent me a picture of her first paycheck, joking about how she finally understood why I used to get so frustrated when she asked for money. Mom stopped bringing up the past and instead focused on more neutral topics when we talked, like her garden or a book she just finished. I wasn't ready to dive back into the family dynamic completely, but for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was carrying the weight of everyone else's expectations. It was slow, but it felt real, like maybe, just maybe, we were finding a new way to be a family. I still kept my boundaries, though. I knew how easy it would be to slip back into old patterns, and I wasn't going to let that happen. If they wanted me in their lives, it would be on my terms this time. And for once, that felt like enough. Months passed, and for the first time in years, my relationship with my family felt manageable. Not perfect, not magically fixed, but manageable. Melanie stayed at her job, juggling her coursework and even managing to save a little money. She didn't call me for help, and that alone was a huge step forward. Mom stopped with the guilt trips, at least for now. Our conversations were lighter, less loaded. She'd ask about my day or tell me a funny story about Dad. It was like she'd finally realized I wasn't just there to fix things. I wasn't naive. I knew it could all fall apart if they slipped back into old habits or if Melanie hit another rough patch. But for now, things were stable. The biggest change, though, was me. I no longer felt like the family's safety net or the one who had to keep everything from collapsing. I had my own life now, and I wasn't willing to give it up again. One evening, I got a text from Melanie. "I'm proud of myself. First time I've ever felt that way. Just wanted you to know." It wasn't much, but it was enough. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't carrying her. She was finally learning to stand on her own. And that's when it hit me. I didn't need to fix everything for them. I just needed to let them figure it out. And maybe, just maybe, we'd all be better for it.